everyone, welcome to another lesson. Today's learning goal is I can apply the formulas for area and circumference of circles to solve problems. So let's go ahead and get started. First we need to know the formulas for the circumference of a circle and the area of a circle and be able to know what the circumference and area mean. Okay, so the formula for the circumference of a circle is circumference equals pi times the diameter. Okay. And you use this formula when you are given or asked to give the outside length of a circle. Okay, so the circumference is the outside length. So it's if we were to take this circle and cut it at some point and then lay it flat. Okay, so like you can imagine like a string, and you make it into a circle, and then you cut the circle. Cut the string and then lay it out flat. What's the length of that? That's the circumference, okay, the outside. Okay. C kind of looks like a circle, so you can kind of imagine that to be the outside of the circle for circumference, okay? The area, we all know what area is. Area, the formula for that is pi r squared. Notice that the r is squared. That's because the area is two-dimensional. Okay, circumference is a length, so it's only one dimension, so that's why it's only d. But here, since we're doing r squared, because it's going to be the area, which is two-dimensional. Okay, when you are given, you use it when you are given or asked to give the area of a circle. Okay, now radius. Let's start with that. The radius is the distance from the center of the circle to the edge of the circle. So right here, you can see that from here, this is the center of the circle, to the edge of the circle, that is the radius. Okay, and then the diameter is the distance from one end of the circle to the other end of the circle. So it has to go through the center, okay, and it goes from one end to the other. So we can also say that the diameter, is twice the distance of r. So diameter equals 2r. Oops. Diameter equals 2r. Okay. So whenever you have the diameter, you can find the radius by cutting that in half, taking half of it. And if you have the radius, you can find the diameter by multiplying the radius by 2. To help us remember the different formulas, I've created this story here, and I want you to follow along as I read it. A girl walks into her kitchen after a long day of playing outside. The sun was just beginning its descent behind the western hills. She smells what she believes is the sweet aroma of cherry pie baking in the oven. With excitement, she exclaims, "Cherry pie? Delicious!" Her mother, sitting at the wooden kitchen table, still coated with the flour she used to bake the pie, corrects the girl. "It's apple pie," she says, barely glancing at the girl. "Apple pies are too," the girl exclaims, no less enthused at the prospect of eating a tasty dessert. Okay. So, what's the point of that story? Well, if you remember what the girl says, cherry pie delicious and apple pies are too, you can remember what the formulas are for the different parts of the circle. So the circumference, cherry pie delicious stands for circumference equals pi times the diameter. Okay, cherry circumference equals pi. Delicious stands for diameter. And then if you remember what she says about apple pies. Apple apple stands for area equals pies are 2. Okay, so apple pies are 2. Area pi r squared. Okay. Here we're going to use the different formulas to find the circumference and area of each of the circles below. So let's start with number 1. Okay, so we're going to remember that the formula for the circumference is cherry pie delicious. So cherry equals pi times d. Okay, now for the purposes of this worksheet and for all worksheets going forward, unless it states otherwise, we're going to use 3.14 for pi. Okay, that just makes things a little bit easier. 3.14 is pi. Okay, it's just the rounded form of pi. That way, we don't have to worry about rounding our final answers or anything like that. Okay, so for circumference. We're not given the diameter for the circle, so we can't use that until we find the diameter. And remember, the diameter is the entire length of the circle from one end to the other. So that means that if the radius is 6, then the diameter is 12. So we're going to do 3.14 times 12. Okay. So what you get when you do that is that the diameter is 37.68 centimeters. Okay. Here again, we're not given the diameter, but we can figure out what the diameter is by doubling the radius. And the radius is 3, so the diameter is 6. So therefore, we're going to do 3.14 times 6. Okay. And when we do that, we find that the diameter, or excuse me, circumference, I'm saying this all wrong, circumference, this should be circumference, the circumference is going to be 18.84 centimeters. Okay. For the last two, we are given the diameter, so we can simply do here 10 times 3.14, diameter times pi times diameter. So the circumference is going to be 31.4 millimeters. And finally, for the last one, we do the diameter, 16 times 3.14. Again, we're going to get a circumference of 50.24 feet. Okay, so those are all the circumferences. Again, circumference means the outside of a circle, so that means all of this, the length of all, as I do my best to trace the outside of the circle right here. Okay, this length right here. Then we're going to find the area of a circle. And remember that the area is apple pie R2. Okay, pi r squared. So here, to find the areas, what we're going to do is we're going to square the radius, which is going to be 6 squared in this case for question number 1. 6 squared and multiply it by 3.14. So 3.14 times 6 squared. And what we find is that the area for this one is 113.04 centimeters squared. Okay. For question number 2, we're going to do the exact same thing. We're going to do pi, or 3.14. Okay, 3.14 times 3 squared, which gets us 28.26 meters squared. Go ahead and do the last two. Remember that in the last two, we are not given the radius, we were given the diameter. What you should have done is 3.14 times 5 squared, because the radius for question number 3 is 5. Okay, and gotten 78.5. And then for the last one, the radius is going to be 8, because half of 16 is 8. So we do 3.14 times 8 squared equals 200.96 feet squared. Okay. Then it says here to find the area of the semicircle below. So again, we're still going to use pi r squared, but that's the formula for the entire circle. Okay, we only have half of a circle, so we're going to have to take half of the area of the circle. So in this case, this is going to equal 3.14 times 3.6 squared times 1/2, or 0.5. This gets us a total of 20.3472 meters squared. Be sure to be using units because these are word problems. Okay. Question number 6. A 360-degree rotating sprinkler that sprays water at a radius of 11 feet is used to water a lawn. What is the area that is sprayed by the sprinkler? Okay. So again, we're going to use apple pies R2. So that would be apple pies R2. Okay. So we got 3.14 times 11 squared is going to give us our area, and what we find that to be is what was that? 379.94 feet squared. Okay. Then this question says the diameter of a bike is 2 feet. How far will the bike go in one rotation of the wheel? So every time you rotate the wheel, it always goes the same distance as the circumference of a wheel. Okay, so this is a circumference question. So circumference equals pi times diameter. Cherry pie delicious. Okay, so in order to find how far the bike will go, we have to do 3.14 times 2, which gets us 6.28 feet. Okay. So, question number 8. Bricks makes $10 pizzas. That is the diameter. What is the area of the pizza? Go ahead and try this one out on your own. What you should have used is pi r squared. Apple pies R2. And the diameter is not inside this. We need to find the radius, so it's going to be half of the diameter. So 3.14 times 5 squared gets us 78.5 inches squared. So now we're going to start working into some algebra with this as well. Okay, so a circle has an area of 38.465 inches squared. What is the radius of the circle? So again, we're going to use the area formula because we're given the area. Okay, area equals pi r squared, and we know that the area is 38.465. And we know that the formula for that is 3.14 r squared. And we're going to try to find what the value of r is. Okay, so in order to do that, we need to get rid of this 3.14. And we're going to get rid of it by dividing, because it's multiplied by the r squared. Okay, what we get when we do that is that r squared equals 38.465 divided by 3.14, 12.25. And then to find the radius, we have to take the square root of both sides. Okay, so again, the golden rule of algebra tells us to do what we do to one side of the equation, we have to do to the other. So we're going to find the square root of 12.25. And the square root of 12.25 is 3.5 inches. So r equals 3.5 inches. Okay, so the key thing here is that once we get to r squared by itself, okay, just like how we would try to get r by itself, we have to take the square root of both sides. Okay, and then the resulting is 3.5 inches. Now that we know that the radius is 3.5 inches, we can find the diameter. Remember, the diameter is the entire length of this between one end of the circle to the other, which means that 3.5 radius means that we have doubling that to get our diameter, which is a diameter of 7 inches, doubling the radius. Okay. Here we're going to do something very similar. We have the circumference now of the circle, and so that means we're going to use cherry pie delicious. Cherry pie delicious. And so the diameter is 50.24 equals 3.14 d. To get d by itself, we have to divide both sides by 3.14, which means that the diameter is 16 centimeters. Okay. Then we have to find the radius of the circle. Remember the radius is half the diameter, so the radius is 8 centimeters. Just 8 centimeters, not 8 centimeters squared. Okay.